the Morgan Hill Children's Museum sat alone on the edge of a quiet town in central North Carolina. It hadn't hosted laughter in over 20 years. Once a beacon of childhood wonder, it had long since decayed into something else, something unnerving. Overgrown hedges crept up broken windows, chipped murals of animals grinned with peeling smiles, and the air around it carried the stale breath of time left to rot. Closed after a series of vague accidents in the late 1990s, the museum had faded from public memory, but locals still crossed the street to avoid walking past it. Some even taught their children to keep their distance. By 2025, the property was purchased by a nonprofit restoration firm called New Leaf Heritage, known for reviving abandoned cultural spaces. The museum's reopening was planned as a hopeful event for the community. Few bothered to ask why no one had tried before. Even fewer asked what really happened in 1998, the night the museum closed forever. Meredith Gray, a driven new curator from Chicago, was assigned to lead the revival. Passionate and pragmatic, Meredith dismissed local gossip about the building being haunted. Ghost stories were just noise to her. She arrived with a team of 3, historian Michael Cobb, electrician Leo Vargas, and intern Sienna Kay. On the first walkthrough, the team encountered oddities. Lights flickered in hallways without power. Doors refused to open even after removing their locks. Every room held signs of sudden abandonment. Half-finished paintings, juice boxes fossilized under display tables, and a single dusty shoe beneath a bench. But Meredith's attention shifted when Michael found something not listed in any of the building's blueprints. A basement-level wing labeled Discovery Hall. The corridor to Discovery Hall had been sealed with a thick, rusted door, welded shut from the outside. The team debated its purpose, but curiosity won. Meredith hired a cutting crew to open it. The metal shrieked as sparks lit up the dark hallway. When the door finally groaned open, a wave of cold air rolled out. Not cool, cold, refrigerated. Inside was a perfectly preserved hallway from another time. Old linoleum floors, bright murals of undersea adventures, miniature forests with animatronic wildlife, all untouched. Oddly, dust had barely settled. It felt too clean, too intact. At the end of the hall sat a dark room behind a glass door with a wooden plaque reading, "The Little Lantern Room." Inside, mirrors lined every wall. Large, warped glass panels mounted in tilted frames. In the center stood a small table with a rusted lantern of iron and cracked red glass. On the mirror nearest the entrance, faded letters appeared, barely visible in the flashlight's beam. "Keep the light burning or they wake." They assumed it was part of an old exhibit, maybe a forgotten storytime theme about ghost tales. No one took it seriously. Meredith photographed everything, planning to list it online as part of the museum's original design. Sienna volunteered to document the lantern room more thoroughly that night. She returned alone after sunset, excited to explore. The building creaked with a strange rhythm as she moved through it. Wind, she told herself, just wind. But when she reached the lantern room, the temperature dropped again. Frost coiled along the edges of her breath. As she set up her camera, the lantern suddenly lit with a dull red glow. No flame, no sound, just light. Cold, vibrating light. Sienna froze. She wasn't imagining it. Then she noticed the mirrors. Reflections began to shift. Her own image remained still, but beside her, behind her, children appeared, silent, dozens, wearing outdated clothes, pale, wet-eyed. Their mouths moved like they were chanting, but there was no sound, only her heartbeat pounding. She turned, but no one was there. The mirrors still showed them, closer now, staring. One girl stepped forward, her image clearer than the rest. Her pigtails were damp and matted. Her skin, grayish, sagging, and her mouth was open far too wide. Sienna bolted. She didn't bother gathering her equipment. She ran out of the museum, shaking, heart racing. That was the last time anyone saw her. By morning, her car was still parked near the museum's front gate. The door was open. Keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. Her phone had one last photo taken inside the lantern room. The lantern was glowing, and behind it, dozens of ghostly faces stared into the lens. Police searched for days. Nothing. No clues. No theories. Meredith tried to keep the project quiet, but the team unraveled. Michael quit the next day, muttering something about mirrors that don't reflect. Leo refused to enter the building again. But every night since, the lantern in the little lantern room burns. There's no power source, no batteries, nothing but red, breathing light. And in the mirrors, something moves. After Sienna's disappearance, the project paused for a full week. Police came and went, offering nothing more than quiet nods and vague reassurances, but no answers. Meredith stayed behind. She had come too far, fought too hard to let ghost stories derail her vision. Sienna's disappearance was tragic, yes, but it wasn't supernatural. It couldn't be. Still, she began locking her hotel door at night. Double-bolted, the lantern room remained sealed. Meredith ordered it boarded over, officially citing safety concerns, unofficially to keep Leo from quitting. He had refused to speak after seeing the photo from Sienna's phone. That girl, he kept muttering. Her mouth wasn't right. With no other wing restored yet, Meredith focused on the west annex of the museum. This area once housed the sensory discovery room, designed to help children with autism explore textures and sounds. The walls were padded. The floors were a strange, spongy rubber, and old speakers were still mounted in the corners. It was supposed to be silent, but from her second night working there, it wasn't. Meredith began hearing whispers. They weren't words. Not at first, just soft exhalations, like someone sighing through teeth rising from the floor. She ignored it, chalking it up to her stress and the building's shifting frame. But they grew louder and closer. It came to a head 3 nights later when she stayed late alone, organizing archived educational panels. Around 1:15 a.m., the silence changed. Not snapped, changed. A slow scrape began beneath her feet, like fingers dragging across wood. Her body froze, heart rate spiking. The scraping circled the room, slow and deliberate. Then it stopped directly under her chair, and then she heard it. "Let us speak." The voice was high and hoarse, like it had forgotten how to use itself. Meredith stood, breath caught, and backed away toward the exit. Her shoes sank slightly into the sponge floor, like something underneath pressed upward. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she called Michael, who had quit but still answered her call. "You've been in Discovery Hall longer than anyone," she said. "Was there anything under the building?" Michael hesitated, then said, "There's something they didn't tell you. Before the museum opened in '73, the land was supposed to be a municipal cemetery, but they abandoned that plan. Rumor is they didn't move the original graves, just built over them." Meredith's stomach dropped. That night, she returned with Leo, who insisted on bringing a crowbar just in case. In the sensory room, she pulled up a corner of the sponge flooring. Beneath the foam was hardwood, old, splintered, and dusty, but some planks were misaligned. Leo wedged the crowbar between two, and with a creak the floorboards lifted, revealing a narrow crawl space barely 3 feet deep. The air below smelled rancid. Meredith dropped a flashlight inside. What it illuminated froze both of them. Small bones, child-sized, arranged not in a grave but in patterns, spirals, circles, crosses made of fingers, and among the bones, cloth dolls, dozens of them, staring upward with stitched smiles. Leo backed away, nearly vomiting. "We're leaving. We're calling the cops." But as they turned, the door slammed shut. They rushed it, locked. The whispering returned, louder now. No longer just voices, but screams stifled in throats. The floor groaned under their feet, and something beneath pushed again, harder. The bones weren't just still. They were shifting, rearranging. "Let us speak," came the voice again. The flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness. And then a hand, thin gray with fingers too long, pushed up through the floor crack. Another followed, and another. Leo swung the crowbar at the boards, but they splintered and bled. The wood bled. Meredith screamed. Somehow the door flew open on its own. Cold wind rushed in, and they bolted. Neither spoke on the ride home. By morning, Meredith reported the bones anonymously. Police arrived, found nothing. No bones, no dolls, just old wood and dust. They didn't believe her, but Leo did. She knew now the museum sat atop something ancient, something that wanted to speak, to show itself, but only when the lights went out and no one else was watching. In the days that followed, Meredith began hearing the voices everywhere, not just at the museum, at her hotel, in her car, in her dreams, always whispering, always beneath her feet. They were getting closer. The museum was no longer just a job site. It had become a wound in Meredith's reality, one that bled more each time she returned. After the night in the sensory room, she tried stepping away. She didn't go for 3 days, but the voices didn't stop. They came in her sleep, in the hum of hotel lights, even in the static of her car radio. Whispered things, pleaded, cursed, always calling her by name. By Friday, something had changed. She didn't just hear the museum anymore, she felt it. Compelled, she returned. When she arrived at the museum's back lot, she saw lights on in the East Wing, the school exhibit area, which hadn't had working power in decades. The lights flickered, low and yellow like old oil lamps. Her stomach twisted. She knew no one else was supposed to be inside. Still, she entered. The museum was colder than it had ever been. Not winter cold, but cellar cold, ancient cold. Her breath misted as she stepped through the darkened halls toward the eastern wing. The old schoolhouse room had once been an educational setup to mimic a 1940s classroom. Chalkboards, desks, fake report cards, even a wax teacher figure at the front. A harmless exhibit. But when Meredith pushed open the warped door, it wasn't the same. The desks had been rearranged into a circle. The teacher mannequin was gone. In its place stood an old wooden easel with a child's drawing pinned to it, scribbled in crayon. A crude sketch of a little girl with black holes for eyes and a mouth sewn shut. A red lantern hovered over her head. On the chalkboard behind it was a message. Class begins when silence falls. As she stepped inside, the door creaked closed behind her. The light in the room dimmed. Shadows thickened in the corners. Then, without warning, all the chairs scraped inward, screeching along the floor until they pointed directly at her. She tried to run, but her legs felt too heavy, as if her feet were being gently nailed into the floor. The walls began whispering. Not voices anymore, less than voices. Breaths, dozens of them. They came from every direction, as if the walls themselves were exhaling. From behind the chalkboard, something began to emerge. At first, it was just the sound, bones clicking as if cracking themselves into shape. Then came the form, a tall, thin figure with limbs too long and joints too many. Its face was half covered in a burlap sack, and the one eye she could see was milky white. It didn't walk. It dragged itself forward. On instinct, Meredith backed toward the desks. But the moment she moved, the easel collapsed, and a child's voice screamed, not loud but sharp, high-pitched and sudden, like glass shattering in her skull. The thing stopped. It tilted its head toward her. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded like a child imitating an adult. Class is in session. Read aloud." "What?" Meredith whispered, shaking. "Read," the voice snapped, shrieking through clenched teeth. The chalkboard changed. Now it showed a poem. 4 lines. "We were left and no one cared. Lessons taught, but none were spared. In silence buried, not in ground. Speak our names or be spellbound." Meredith choked on her breath. The walls rippled like something behind them strained to push through. "Speak our names," the voice repeated. I don't know your names," she cried. Suddenly, from the floorboards, hands erupted. Small, bone-thin hands with chewed-off fingernails. They reached for her ankles, pulling, not hard, not violently, more like begging. Dozens of them. The room darkened again. "Say, our names." A chill wind blew through the room. The drawing on the easel fluttered up into her hands as if offered. She looked at it again, and now there were names beneath the girl. Anna, Luke, Maribel, Jonah. She began to speak them aloud. The hands paused. The figure retreated behind the chalkboard, slowly melting back into the wall. The classroom warmed, just slightly. The lights returned to their soft yellow glow. The desks moved again, this time arranging themselves into tidy rows. But the chalkboard now said something new. "You've passed today's lesson, but detention waits." Meredith stumbled backward, ran for the door, and this time it opened. She sprinted down the hallway, heart racing, tears streaming. But behind her, the whispers followed, louder now, clearer. And for the first time, they didn't sound angry. They sounded grateful. Still, she didn't stop, not until she reached the parking lot. There, she collapsed in her car, shaking. Inside the museum, the lights in the classroom flicked off, one by one. That night, she found another message under her hotel door. No envelope, just a page torn from an old workbook. In a child's handwriting, "Thank you for hearing us, but others are still trapped." Meredith didn't sleep that night. Not really. She closed her eyes, but her mind stayed inside the museum. Each time she drifted near rest, a sharp whisper dragged her awake. By morning, she felt as if something had crawled into her chest and made a nest there. Heavy, cold. Still, something inside her needed to return. She didn't bring tools or plans this time. No clipboard, no flashlight, just herself, a notebook, and the strange message she'd found. "Thank you for hearing us, but others are still trapped." The museum was silent when she arrived. Not just empty, silent, as if it was listening. She followed the now familiar path through Discovery Hall, past the shuttered sensory room and the hollow classroom. Something had shifted in the air. The lights hummed a little too low. The shadows stretched a little too long. She reached the corridor marked Exploration Wing, which once housed a now abandoned exhibit called The Mind Maze. A mirror maze meant to teach kids about perception and memory, but what she saw wasn't what the brochure ever showed. Instead of playful painted walls and warped funhouse glass, the entrance to the maze was framed in black wood, charred and splintering. Above the archway, the exhibit's name was different. Through Self to Truth. Meredith hesitated. The air from the maze smelled damp and sweet, like rot. But deeper than that was the metallic scent of blood. Still, her feet moved forward. She stepped inside. Instantly, the light dimmed. The door closed behind her with a soft but final click. The mirrors weren't ordinary. They weren't even reflections of her. At first glance, they mimicked her form, but not her expression. In every pane, her face was twisted, frightened, screaming, bleeding. Her hands moved differently in each. One mirror showed her holding a knife. Another showed her covering her ears. One showed her being pulled backward by invisible hands, mouth stretched open in a silent scream. She turned, and the hallway behind her was gone. There was no exit. Suddenly, the lights above flickered. then died. The only light left came from within the mirrors, faint, bluish, unnatural. A voice echoed inside the maze. "Which one is you?" It was the same childlike mimic voice from the hollow classroom, but warped now. Slower, hungrier. The mirrors began to shimmer. Each reflection started moving independently. In one, Meredith saw herself walking calmly. In another, she sobbed. One was banging her fists against the glass, begging. A fourth looked directly at her and smiled. Not kindly, not humanly, wide and wrong. She ran, through narrow halls, past twisting glass, but every turn led her to more mirrors. No doors, no signs. Just endless versions of herself, each more corrupted than the last. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Behind her. She turned fast, nothing there. But in the mirror next to her, one reflection stepped forward, out of sync. Her doppelganger stared directly at her, then raised one hand and pointed to a broken panel of glass. On it, words were etched in something dark and dried. "The true self bleeds. The lie survives." A mirror to her left cracked, then another. Soon the entire maze was filled with the sound of splintering glass. Her heart pounded as she backed away until she bumped into someone. She spun around. It was herself, but not. This reflection had no eyes, just black, rotting sockets. Its mouth smiled too wide, teeth too many, skin stretched too thin. It didn't move like a person. It twitched, shuddered. Meredith screamed. The thing lunged. She dove sideways, crashing into a glass panel that gave way like water. Instead of slicing her, it swallowed her. Suddenly, she was somewhere else. A circular room made of mirrors, all of them broken. In the center, a single, small child sitting cross-legged. Pale skin, black hair, blank eyes, holding something in her lap. A mirror shard. The child looked up. "You finally came." Meredith knelt slowly. "Who are you?" "We're what's left," the girl said softly. "Of the ones who weren't allowed to leave. They said we were imaginary, but we were forgotten." The girl lifted the shard. "See it." Meredith hesitated, but then took it. The moment her fingers closed around the mirror, images rushed through her. Screaming children locked in museum rooms during a fire, teachers running but leaving the lower floor sealed, administrators pretending the basement never existed, lawsuits buried, stories suppressed. Discovery Hall hadn't closed for renovations. It had burned, with people inside. Tears ran down Meredith's cheeks. "They left you," she whispered. "They tried to," the girl said, "but places like this remember. Places like this preserve." Suddenly, the mirrors around the room rippled. A deep rumble shook the space. "They're waking up," the child said. "The others. You have to leave." "I can't leave you here." The girl tilted her head. "You already did, long ago." Before Meredith could respond, the floor gave way beneath her. She fell, not onto ground, but into herself. She awoke outside the maze, gasping, cold, crying. Behind her, the entrance to the exhibit was once again boarded up, as if it had never opened. But in her hand, clenched tight, was the shard of glass. And inside it, her reflection was still screaming. The storm had returned the night Meredith Grey re-entered the Morgan Hill Children's Museum, lightning slicing the sky with erratic fury. The wind howled like 100 lost voices, slamming doors behind her before she even touched them. She stood soaked in the threshold, eyes fixed on the now warped building. It was no longer just decayed. It was alive, breathing. Inside, the mirrors were everywhere. They weren't confined to the little lantern room anymore. They covered every inch of wall space, multiplied like cancer. Some reflected her normally. Others twisted her face, too wide, too empty, smiling when she wasn't. In one mirror, she saw herself hanging from a noose. In another, she was missing her eyes. and in several more, children crowded behind her, unmoving, black-eyed, smiling wide. "Not real," she whispered. The mirrors giggled. She wandered deeper, each step rearranging the halls behind her. The layout had changed again. Doors vanished after closing. Murals peeled themselves into blank white eyes. One wall displayed crude crayon stick figures, one hanging, one burned, one drowning. A name beneath each: Sienna, Jason, Meredith. At last, she reached the little lantern room. It opened by itself. The red lantern was no longer hanging. It hovered, pulsing, bleeding light like a living organ. The mirrors inside had grown, warped into columns that towered up to a ceiling that didn't exist. Each one showed versions of her, crying, screaming, running, dying. And behind her, in each, the children, unblinking, always closer. She turned. They were there, not in reflections, in the room. They stepped forward in silence. Some floated, some twitched, some crawled with backward limbs, heads lolling. Their faces were familiar. Sienna, Jason, others she didn't know, maybe from old newspaper clippings, missing posters. One girl held a balloon that was dripping. "Come play," one whispered, teeth too many. "You were the last. Now we're whole." Meredith backed into a mirror and fell through it. She landed in an identical room but colder, frozen in grayscale. The red lantern floated over her double, a version of herself with cracked skin, hollow sockets, smiling unnaturally wide. "You gave us a way back," the double whispered. "Now you stay." The floor split open. Arms, small, clawed, rose from beneath. They clawed into Meredith's legs, pulling her down as she screamed. Her cries bounced from mirror to mirror like trapped thunder. The lantern dimmed as the children dragged her into the dark. Her double laughed. "You let us in." The mirrors went still. In the real world, days passed. Eventually, the museum reopened under a new name: Everlight Discovery Center. Fresh paint, new staff, smiling volunteers. Families returned, unaware. But the mirrors stayed, and they remembered. Children giggled alone in corridors. Visitors complained about cold spots. One teacher swore she saw her own face blink when she hadn't. A janitor quit after seeing a child's handprint appear on the mirror while alone at night. Then came the birthday party. 7-year-old Lila wandered off. She was last seen staring into a mirror too long. They never found her body, only her reflection, still standing, eyes wide, smiling faintly. Now, locals avoid the museum at night. Teens dare each other to sneak in, but those who do speak of voices in the walls, shadows in the mirrors, and sometimes seeing themselves blink out of time. A few went missing for hours, returned silent, changed. One wrote in a notebook, "The mirrors show what's inside, and then they take it." Parents joke about the museum being haunted, but some believe it's more than that. They say the mirrors collect souls, that every reflection is a version of you, trapped, waiting to escape, and that once you've seen yourself smile when you shouldn't, it's already too late. They say you don't go missing. You get replaced. If you ever visit Morgan Hill and the museum calls to you, don't go. But if you must, don't follow your reflection. Don't believe the laughter. And whatever you do, don't say your name out loud near a mirror. It might answer.